If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fists. My name is Frank Latirzo, part-time writer, full-time observer, joined by former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America, Jack Hirsch. Jack, how you doing tonight? You in a good mood or not? You got to unmute yourself.
Now I started off in a bad mood because I was muted. I mean, but once I get going, I'm fine.
Are you in Florida?
No, I've been back in New York for a while. Well, not a while, like 3 weeks to thereabouts, so 2.5 weeks. So it's good to be back here, catching a number of fight shows that are going to be upcoming. Looking forward to Hall of Fame weekend. And, speaking of Hall of Fame weekend, what a segue, Frank, because the big name getting inducted in Canastota this year is Manny Pacquiao. He's getting inducted into the Hall of Fame, meaning you have to be retired for 5 years to be eligible to be in the Hall of Fame. Yet he's making a comeback. And this has happened. Quiz for you, Frank. You probably haven't given it any thoughts, but you'll probably Google it, Frank. You've been known to bend
Jack, I want to make sure I'm Googling his name to make sure. Has it been exactly 5 years since he fought?
Well, 5 years since the voting, yeah. Well, we voted, I voted him in, and he will be there in June. Supposedly, that would be the ultimate insult if he didn't show up the beginning of June because he has to fight with Mario Barrio 6 weeks later. But I'm sure he has too much respect for boxing history, I feel, not to be there. But I could tell you a little story with Manny Pacquiao very quickly that went on behind the scenes. When I was the president of the Boxing Writers Association of America, he was scheduled to be honored with the Fight of the Year award, and everyone was excited. Pacquiao's coming in from the Philippines. He was iconic at the time when he, first won it. I get a call 2 nights before from a reporter in the Philippines. Pacquiao's not going to be there. He says he's definitely not going to be there. I call up Bob Arum. Arum had no idea about that news. Arum goes, what? Arum called him up and he reeled him back in. But the reason Arum wanted him to be there is because Arum needed Pacquiao to promote an upcoming fight, I think, against Miguel Cotto for the press conference. Arum wasn't doing it for the BWAA, but that's what he was saying he was doing it for. But that's okay. Bob got the job done one way or the other. Yeah, let me give you a little quiz, Frank. This has happened 2 other times, maybe 3, but 2 other times I can remember where fighters got inducted into the Hall of Fame. And then after the announcement was made, and you can't retract the announcement once they announce you're going to be in, and then the fighters announced they were making a comeback. And they made a comeback. Who were those 2 fighters, if you had to guess? All
right, the first one that pops in my mind is Sugar Ray Leonard.
You got it. That's right.
The second one is a little tougher. Give me a hint.
He was in a lighter weight division. He was
when did he fight?
A non-American. Wasn't an American.
So off the top of my head, Jack, I can't think.
Okay, I'll give you another hint. An all-time great fighter, but a little short of being amongst the elite. He wasn't a Mount Rushmore fighter, but he was an all-time great. You could say any Hall of Famer is an all-time great, but this guy was an all-time great. But not not the Mount Rushmore all-time great. Like he wasn't quite Roberto Duran. Now, close to Duran's level. That's a hint. Close.
Give me the exact weight class.
A multiple weight champion. Well, everyone's a multiple weight champion. He turned back the challenge of a fighter who was tremendously inspired trying to take the title off him. That fighter trying to take the title off him and didn't succeed, but that challenger had a heck of a story.
Aguayo.
Aguayo, I got you, yeah. With the hint.
Because you're talking about Mancini, right?
Right. I gave
yeah, that gave, okay, that did.
Yeah,
and he fought Billy Costello, right?
No, he fought a guy, Scott Walker Aguayo, and he lost that fight. And Leonard fought Camacho, and he was
okay. I'm thinking fight. Costello. This was after Aguayo fought Costello.
Yeah, after Aguayo fought Costello.
Because he fought Costello in '86.
Yeah. So that was after. So the point is, so what Pacquiao's doing, it's happened before. But I'm not against it, Frank. I think 5 years is too long to wait. I think because this is boxing.
He last fought in August of 2021. I just looked. That's what I was Googling to get the exact date. He fought Ugas in August of 2021. So August 21st, 2021. Lost a unanimous decision.
Oh, I think they changed the guideline to 3 years. Maybe you have to be retired.
They did 3 years.
Oh, okay, right. Okay, that explains it. And I don't find anything wrong with it. I mean, this is boxing, Frank. We have these fighters who fight once every 2-3 years, and they'll do it till the age of 57, maybe. You know what? We're going to keep them out of the Hall of Fame?
No.
And Roy Jones, I forgot. When did he last fight? I forgot whether he's in the Hall of Fame or not. I don't think he.
Yeah, Roy's in.
Roy's got in.
Matty is 46, Jack. Matty is 46.
Well, let's discuss the fight with Mario Barrios. Okay, Pacquiao's last fight, he loses to Ugas. A competitive decision, but he definitely lost the fight. Okay, not a decision.
From what I saw, Jack, he couldn't get off. He looked like an older, slower guy that knew what he wanted to do, but his body just wouldn't react. And I can't think he's any better now.
Okay, now you make a good point. He claimed, supposedly the word was he was injured going into the fight. Okay? Did Pacquiao have any instance early in his career where he performed in a subpar way, and then his next fight on the near future, he turned it around? The only thing I could think of would be the Mayweather loss, and then he turned in a great win against Keith Thurman. And Keith Thurman is no slouch. Keith Thurman's a darn good fighter, you know. Say what you want about his attitude, but he, was a legitimate number 1 and number 2 in that division. Probably number 2 behind Errol Spence, number 3 behind Spence and Crawford, if Crawford was in the welterweight division at that time. But
what I'm going to say to that, Jack, is, and it's not politically correct, but there were some allegations that were never proven that Matty may have used some performance enhancing drugs. He didn't look good against Broner. He comes back and he looks reborn against Keith Thurman. They have strict drug testing for the Ugas fight. He did not look good. That I don't like how that sits with me. I don't want to accuse anybody, but I'm not going to rule it out completely. I want to see him. I don't hope he doesn't get hurt. I can't see him being competitive with a 29-year-old guy who's only lost to Davis and Keith Thurman. 4 years is a long time at 46, Jack, with those younger weight guys. I don't know. I mean, I don't think he'll win. I'm not going to tell him not to do it. This is my only hope. I hope that he's not doing it because he needs money, because I don't know if you saw, but there's a heavyweight tournament with guys over 50 that they just announced. And Frank Bruno is partaking in that. And he did say he was doing it for the money. He didn't say he needed the money, but he said he was doing it for the money. I hope with all the money that Matty made, he's just doing it because, like Ray Leonard, the sport of boxing at the elite level is a drug, and he can't get it out of his system.
Well, he's running for Senate, and Pacquiao has a reputation of giving everything away. I remember during the prime of his career, I was told that, by the people.
Apartment buildings and things like that. Yes.
Right, just, very generous. Sometimes there's such thing as being too generous, of being foolish if you're going to leave yourself in a poor financial way because you just want to give your stuff away. I mean, it's wonderful to have a nice heart, but you have to be able to manage it, and you have to be sure.
You have to live your life, Jack, because you can live another 40 years.
Right. Yourself and your family have to be taken care of first. And once you're secure that way, if you're able to give, back, by all means, you should.
Jack, don't you think the bigger question is, does he deserve a title shot? Is it just because he's a name?
Oh, just because he's a name, he gets it gift wrapped out of the ring a few years, and the fight's going to draw. And he's fighting a guy, if he is to get it done at the age of 46, and I kind of have major doubts at his age at this point. Mario Barrios is a very beatable guy. Now, if you put him in against, you mentioned like names like Tank Davis before, you put him in against Crawford, someone like that, he has no shot at all. Okay.
But that would be that. They tried to make that fight before. That would have been suicide.
Right. And Mario Barrios, there's some hope there. The door's at least open. Now, you mentioned something about rumors, performance enhancing drugs and all that. I have no idea whether he's been on it, whether he hasn't been on it.
I don't either, Jack. I'm just not ruling it out because I think a lot of them do it.
He hasn't been, he says
never failed a test.
He hasn't been on it. He hasn't failed a test. I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm going under the assumption he hasn't been on it. But I remember I was talking to someone, strangely enough, who interviewed me years ago. I mean, I haven't had a lot of interviews, me being interviewed, but he was interviewing me, and we were talking about Pacquiao, and I was talking about one of Pacquiao's opponents, and I said, that fight against Pacquiao, I'm disregarding because that opponent, was on, I'm certain was on, steroids. So when I was talking off the record, and the guy told me, he said, get out of here immediately, the interviewer, because he was from the Wild Card Gym. He says, everyone at the Wild Card Gym knows Manny is on it. And I go like, what? It kind of jolted me. But Pacquiao's never failed.
Well, I know the fight you're talking about, and I think they were both on it.
Yeah, well, Pacquiao's never failed a test. So,
Neither is Holyfield.
But I'm going to tell you, that's why boxing is a gutted sport. Roger Clemens has never failed a test, yet he can't get in the Hall of Fame. But boxers who would have officially failed multiple tests, we welcome right in to the boxing. Hall of
Jack,
Fame.
but when the
sport, Frank, we're talking about a gutted sport.
Jack, all the combat sports I'm suspicious of regarding performance enhancing drugs. But you talk about somebody like Clemens. The thing is, if you look at guys of that era, like I saw a picture the other day of Barry Bonds next to Ken Griffey. Okay. This was a picture about a year or two ago. And do you remember when Barry Bonds came up, Jack? He was built like Marvin Hagler. And by the end of his career, he was built like the old George Foreman. Now he's skinny again. How'd that happen? That just makes you think a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. I don't put it past. I don't put it past any of them. But I'll tell you what, Barrios. Think about this, Jack. Barrios basically retired Ugas, who we thought retired Pacquiao. Now he's going to fight Pacquiao, and there's a chance he could be the guy to retire both of them.
I've never been impressed with Barrios. He's not an elite fighter. And what's going to happen if Barrios wins this fight against Pacquiao, which he probably will? It's not a certainty because it's Barrios. The door's at least open where I'm willing to give Pacquiao an outside chance of actually winning the fight because it's Mario Barrios, okay?
Right. We see the same.
But if Barrios wins the fight, he's going to fight one of the big name opponents out there. And they're going to be lining up to fight Barrios. They'll think, oh, it's a lucrative fight for me and it's an easy fight. It's a fight I'm definitely going to win. He's not a world-class fighter. I mean, that's
Right.
why Pacquiao's taking him on like first fight back. And I mean, how many other options did Pacquiao have? I mean, they would have lined up the fight. There was talk, actually, believe it or not, of a catch weight, Pacquiao and Lomachenko.
Well, Lomachenko's been out of the ring. He's had some injuries, but I still think he's too young and too energetic for Pacquiao.
Probably, yeah. And but it's like everyone jockeys for position to get a meaningful fight, and it's hard. Some fighters like an Andre Ward, a Terence Crawford, they have nerves of steel. They're willing to wait it out and take years off their career until things fall into place. You know, it kind of worked for Crawford. The Errol Spence fight, it kind of finally fell into place. I think there was a big demand in boxing that fight be made. And now Crawford has a situation where he's able to get the Canelo fight. Because
I read he's getting $50 million, Jack.
$50 million. What's Canelo getting? Have you heard?
I think I read 180.
I mean, to have Canelo take a risk for 180, he's willing to take the risk.
Jack, he made 80 against Skull.
That's what
in his last fight. He made 80, and Ryan Garcia made 20 million.
That is in.
The money's insane.
But certain fighters who are the marquee attractions, you know, can do. And I think Canelo signed like a 3-fight deal or more. He might even have the skull match Crawford, maybe Chris Eubank Jr. After that, I'm not sure exactly whether there's a rematch clause, Crawford and Canelo. No one's talking about it.
Well, Jack, if he wins the fight, he can name his opponent. We know that. If Crawford wins, that's where the monkey wrench comes, because would they fight again? Would Crawford fight him again? That's part of the intrigue of the fight, because there's so much riding on it.
Well, Crawford, I feel, is going to beat Canelo. And I remember what you said last week. Normally, I need to wait. It's so hard to pick a fight. It's not as hard for me to pick this fight. Do I think it's going to be close and competitive? Probably harder in decision. That would be my guess. It might even be a controversial decision. I don't think Crawford's going to beat Canelo up and, put a beating on him the way he did to Errol Spence.
The odds are coming down. The odds have come down.
Well, I think that had to do with the way Canelo looked in his last fight.
And I talked to some guys who hold a value opinion, and they actually think the night of the fight, Crawford's going to be the favorite.
Wow, that is surprising to me. And Crawford's going to enter the ring as a big guy. Fighters run into a problem. They go up and down in weight. Crawford's only going up. I don't see what the problem is. Let me throw an example to you, because they didn't have all the weight classes at the time. This seems crazy. Now, my favorite fighter of all time was Jimmy Ellis. I was a fan. I love Jimmy Ellis. Don't misunderstand me. I think heavyweights who came after would have beaten him, like Ken Norton, Evander Holyfield, etc. So don't get me wrong. I'm not one of these fanatics. But Ellis came up from middleweight, where he lost 5 fights, and went up to heavyweight. Now, if we had
beat some good heavyweights.
But no. But the point is, if we had a super middleweight, a light heavyweight, they had a light heavyweight then, in a cruiserweight division, it would have been considered insane for Ellis to go up and try the heavyweight. Yet he was able to do it successfully.
If Crawford's the favorite, I guess it doesn't hurt him if he wins the fight, because Mayweather was the favorite when they fought, and it didn't hurt him. So I guess either way, if Crawford wins, it's a monumental win for him. Again, Jack, I'm going to reserve picking that fight, because I'm going to say right out front, I can't be objective. Crawford's my favorite fighter, and I'm rooting for him. And if I make a pick, I'll I will look for every reason to shade it to him, and I don't want to lose my objectivity.
Wait a second, Laterzo, you were clear that Canelo would be too much for him all along, and now you're actually wavering. You're probably still
I'm
going
not,
with
Jack. I said
Canelo.
from the beginning, I'm not going to make a pick.
What do you mean you're not going to make a pick? You're
I'm not going to make a pick for the fight. I'm saying up front, I can't be objective.
You have to feel one guy is going to beat the other guy. I mean, so in other words, you don't want to pick Canelo because if Crawford wins, if you meet up with Crawford, you can't tell him you've had faith in him all along.
No, Jack, because I am superstitious, I'm afraid if I pick Canelo and I want him to win, that will ensure he loses. I'm sorry, if I pick Crawford, that will ensure he loses. Where if I pick Canelo, I'm doing it to jinx him, and I don't want to get into that kind of a pick. I may came up with a way, Jack, where I'll tell you what I'll do. Before the fight, I'll write down in an envelope somewhere who I picked. And after the fight, we'll open the envelope.
What are you imitating Muhammad Ali before the first Frazier fight? It didn't work for Ali.
No, he opened the envelope before the fight. He said, "This is what's going to happen to Joe Frazier."
You probably have multiple envelopes there, and I'll know which one to snatch out. Come on.
I never thought of that. Thanks for that idea. I didn't think of that.
You know, we're going to have a guest in a little while at 7:30. We're going to start having guests on this show, and we can't ask Ron Scott Stevens, our guest, who he's picking to win certain fights because he's a judge in California. Even though the odds are strongly against him getting the assignment, you know, Ron's held a lot of other positions. Being a judge is one of the least of them compared to the other big things he's done in the sport. And he also is a playwright. He's going to mention, you know, briefly the work that he's working on. But judges can't comment like who they think's going to win this or that. But sometimes it does bother me with judges. It's like an exclusive little club. They'll never question the other guy. You know, they won't say, well, I disagreed. I'll try to defend one another and so on. But summing up with Pacquiao and Barrios, age 46, coming off a 4-year layoff. And, you know, I just would be very surprised if Pacquiao won, you know, this fight. And if he does win, it would be by a close decision. And
he's a guy, Jack, that depends on instincts and timing. And what do you think happens when you sit on the shelf? You lose instincts and timing and speed.
And history tells us it's going to be a sad ending, that he probably gets stopped 8-9 rounds or whatever.
Won't hurt his legacy at all, though.
I think people forget about it. You know, legacies, you know, are strange. Some people remember fights and they hold it against the fighter's legacy, and other times they don't. They completely forget. You forget as if it doesn't count, as if the fight never even took place. So, yeah, I mean, we could discuss.
Jack, nobody holds it against Sugar Ray Leonard that he got stopped by Hector Camacho.
No, yeah, I'll agree. You know, fans, I saw something on social media, Frank, and I got to owe fans in general an apology. They're a little more astute than I thought, okay? I keep talking about all the fanboys that are out there. Maybe they're less fanboys than I think, because the question was proposed, which you've been pretty firm on. Who would have won a mythical matchup between Tommy Hearns and Floyd Mayweather? You would think it would be split with the amount of people responding. A ton of people responded. 9 out of 10 of them were going with Hearns. I mean, and don't get me wrong, in the majority of people, I wouldn't think would be the most knowledgeable of boxing fans, yet they didn't fall into that trap. Oh, Mayweather's the greatest of all time. I personally think Mayweather would have been competitive. He would have fought a good fight. I think Hearns would have outpointed him. But that's all hypothetical. But
you know what's funny about that, Jack?
Yeah.
I saw the same poll, and you give them credit because they didn't get it wrong, and it wasn't asinine as far as the results. I look at it the complete opposite. If they can't get that one right, which is so obvious, then they have no right to even discuss things, because that is no contest. It's easy. And the bigger question should be, would Floyd have taken the fight? And we know that the answer to that is he would not.
At another era, he probably would have taken the fight, because it wouldn't have been the end of his career. He would have still been in his prime, and he wouldn't have been protecting the unbeaten record as much, and for him to become a mega star, at some point he would have had to take a chance. Let's say he was living in the era of Leonard, Hearns, Benitez. So he probably would have wanted to fight Benitez first, Floyd, because that would have been a chess match, which Floyd may have edged out. Okay,
it's a tough fight for Floyd and Benitez.
Yeah. So I could see Floyd winning a nip and tuck fight against Wilfred Benitez, and
I could see it going the other way.
Yeah, but keep in mind, Benitez had his share of off nights, and Floyd didn't have as many off nights. Benitez against Bruce Curry got knocked down 3 times, but then in the rematch that I was at the Garden, he looked
from the Curry rematch until the Duran fight. That's about a 4-year window, and the only time he didn't quite get it done was the Leonard fight, and that Hearns fight was close too.
Yeah, well, the Hearns. Yeah,
and look at the two guys, 2 all-time greats.
Yeah, but it's all
2 of the greatest of the greats.
It's all hypothetical, but the point I'm making is Mayweather would have been at a different stage of his career, and sometimes you gotta take fights. Look, Canelo doesn't want to fight Crawford. Canelo strikes me as a fighter who's very concerned about his legacy, extremely. That's what he strikes me as. I don't know, does he strike you that way?
Oh, I definitely think that, Jack. I think I saw an interview with Canelo. He was talking about his cars and some of his possessions, and he came off as a very condescending guy who talks down to people. I'm not crazy about Canelo as a person. I think he's an outstanding, borderline, great fighter. But I think he's looking at this as, if he beats Crawford, he can say, hey, I beat the best fighter in boxing, the pound-for-pound guy, and this avenges my loss to Mayweather when I was too young, and I lost to him fighting at 152. If this does not go good for Canelo, Jack, he's going to look bad.
Would you say, when you said he's condescending, I don't get the feeling that Canelo's a bad person, anything like that. But would you
can be a good person and be condescending.
Okay, I think another way, not condescending. I think of all the fighters in boxing, he has the biggest sense of entitlement. He always says, I can do whatever I want. And you want to know something?
I'll agree with that.
When you've made the money he has, you can. But everyone has a price, 180 million, Frank, man.
Jack, I guess because I'm such a car geek, and Canelo was talking about cars, and it's like certain cars he was putting down and saying, I'd never be caught dead in that. And these were really high-end, exclusive cars. And I thought, wow, for you to talk like that about that kind of a car and to say you would not be caught dead in that, it just rubbed me the wrong way. But again, I'm a car geek. If you saw it, it probably wouldn't have bothered you.
There's the guy. I could give a little bit of an intro here, Frank. Hey, welcome to our show. Ron Scott Stevens, great credentials there. I don't know, Ron, have you ever met my co-host? I'm his co-host, Frank Laterzo from Philadelphia. Frank's got a lot of
How you doing, Ron?
experience in business. As a writer, former fighter himself. Ron Scott Stevens, he's a boxing judge now in California, the former commissioner of boxing in New York State, a boxing magazine editor. Actually, the first story I ever wrote in boxing, I went up to the office of Boxing Beat magazine, and Ron assigned me a very glamorous story on Cutmen. Okay, but I got. Was it
a good story, Ron?
Well, actually, Jack, it was Boxing Today, not Boxing Beat.
Oh, you became editor of Boxing Beat after that, right?
Boxing Beat was later, and it was a good story. Right. And I believe you were writing at that time for the British.
No, that started after 1989.
Yeah.
Right.
But Jack came up to the office on 20, I think it was 9th Street near the Garden, and he pitched himself as an informed boxing guy, and I liked him, and I gave him a column, and he was writing a column once a month for Boxing Today.
Right, but you have like right now. Tell us what you're working on before we get to the hardcore boxing stuff, and Frank will have questions after.
Well, I'll show you this. I entered this in a screenplay contest. You see it?
Red, green, and yellow.
And it's a screenplay that I wrote 3 or 4 years ago, and I've been trying to get it produced, and I get a lot of emails, and one of them was for an all-genre screenplay contest. And I entered it, and I didn't even realize that what they did is they created the graphic. They created the graphic with the taxi cab, and it's about a taxi cab driver by the name of Nick Castle that's using the cab to sell cocaine out of it. And it goes from there. But the point is that the screenplay contest, it's based on sales. Whoever has the most sales by the end of June will be introduced to producers and agents who might be able to make the screenplay happen. So that's what I'm pushing right now. But I've written, I'm working on my 5th screenplay. I was writing plays all these years, and I started with 3 of Us Left, and I wrote a boxing screenplay called Lippy. It was about a boxing manager that managed Hurricane Jackson back in the 50s, who, of course, fought Floyd Patterson at the Polo Grounds. And the real Lippy was an advisor in boxing, and he advised Vito Antuofermo and Hurricane Jackson. And he told me in real life that it was his belief that Hurricane Jackson was rubbed with a liquid that clogged up his pores, and that when he went to fight Floyd Patterson in the Polo Grounds, he had no energy. And I took the germ of that story and I created a whole play called Lippy. And it starred William Hickey, who was nominated that year for the Supporting Actor Academy Award for Prizzi's Honor. He played the Godfather in Prizzi's Honor, and he was nominated. And he did my play in Manhattan, right off of Broadway at the Quaid Theater. So I did that, and Red, Green, and Yellow, the one I just showed you, originally was a play, but I realized it would be better as a screenplay. So 10, 15 years later, I turned it into a screenplay. I had a guy that when I was promoting boxing in my neighborhood at Gleason's Arena, Gleason's Gym was in downtown Brooklyn.
Yeah, we want to talk about that in a little while, all the things you've been doing in boxing.
I just to say that in boxing, the guy who used to sing the national anthem at all my boxing shows was a guy by the name of Vernon Cherry. He was a fireman, and he passed away in 9/11. He responded to 9/11 from the engine company, ladder company in Brooklyn, Engine 205, ladder 118. And I wrote a play called Cherry's Patch, basically celebrating his life.
And can everyone go to Amazon and get, the book you have?
They can get Red, Green, and Yellow on Amazon Books. Red, Green, and Yellow is the title. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, I've been writing plays and now screenplays for a long time.
Right. And Ron, you're a boxing judge in California right now.
Yes, I am. And okay. I've been licensed since October of 2018. I've done about 450 fights so far. Not all of them go to the scorecard. About maybe 250 have gone to the scorecard. And my numbers are good. I'm probably 95% in the majority, which means 9.5 out of 10 times I'm in the majority, which is a good score. When I was chairman running the Boxing Commission in New York, if I had somebody that was 90% and above, I considered it pretty good. So,
Frank, come in anytime you want. You could cut in.
I have one question. Yeah. You would seem to be the man who could give a cogent answer. What would you say to the people when there is an outlandish score and it goes in favor of what they consider the money fighter or the house fighter, and then people like myself come away saying it's one of two things: incompetence or corruption. And before you answer that, my take is, if everybody's competent and on the up and up and they watch the same 12 rounds, I can't see, I don't want to hear I was sitting here or he was sitting there, how there could be such a variance.
Well, let me say this. I have not experienced any corruption here in California. I think that the judges are all honest. In New York, I felt 99% that way. When I wasn't the commissioner, when I was a promoter, I had a feeling that one or two of the fights that I was promoting that they weren't kosher, but I couldn't prove it. That said, 99.9% of the fights that I've been involved in, either as a matchmaker, as a promoter, a writer, an editor, a ring announcer, a publicist, I don't. So if it's not corruption, then it's, you mentioned incompetence. For example, the other night, the ESPN show that came out of San Diego at the Pechanga Arena. If you look at the scores, they were great. I didn't work that show, but they were great. And I'm not defending bad scores, but for the most part, I'd say 95%, if not a little higher, most of the scores are pretty good. Now, I was speaking to Steve Farhood the other day, who, of course, is an analyst for Showtime, was a boxing guy, edited a lot of magazines, KO, The Ring, longtime Showtime boxing analyst, and then he became the judge for Showtime. And I said to him the other day, Steve, do you experience it different on TV than you do in person? And he said, of course I do. And I said, so which one do you get a fair reading from? And he said, you know, you get some things in person you don't get on the screen, and you get some things on the screen that you don't get in person. The one thing that you do get in person is you hear the sound of the punches. You hear the boxers react. My final thought on this is, and we can discuss it further if you like, but some rounds are so close. They're so close that if you have one judge or two out of the three judges thinking that A, as opposed to B, edged out the round, and the other guy, for whatever reason, the third judge, thinks that B edged out the round, you'll have two guys saying 98-92 for red and one guy saying 98-92 for blue, and you think that they're crazy, but they're not so crazy. They're so close. And another thing that adds to that is commissions don't want you to score even rounds anymore. In the old days, and not that long ago, you could have 10-10 rounds. And you know, Jack, and that oftentimes you had the judges score 2, 3, 4 rounds even. They don't even want you to score one round even. So you have to make a decision. Me personally, I'm keeping track of that round in my head as we move through the round. And as soon as it's over, I'm entering my score. The last thing I'll say is it's one thing to watch a fight and not be responsible for entering a score. But if you're the guy who has to commit pen to paper and enter a score, it's a whole different story. So I just think that for the most part, the referees and the judges do a pretty good job.
I think you did a great job explaining that.
Thank you.
I happen to believe that there are some rounds where neither guy did enough to merit the round. And a guy that throws 2 jabs at the end of the round that missed by 6 inches, in some cases, we know that wins him the round. I don't like that. I think there should be a little latitude with even rounds. But I guess I'm talking about like maybe some of the crazy fights. But, you know, like you said, the best explanation is some of the rounds are so close And if I like one guy's style over the other and I go towards him, you could have a lopsided score.
Yeah.
Today it's pretty common, and I spoke to Steve Weisfeld a year ago about this.
That's Frank's favorite judge.
Excuse me, Jack, say that again.
Steve Weisfeld's Frank's favorite judge.
He's a good judge.
He is a good judge. No, he is a very good judge.
He was a very good judge.
For me, and in my opinion, yeah.
And I said to Stephen, when I was chairman, I'd made all the assignments for 6 years. I assigned every ref, every judge, every timekeeper, every doctor.
Well, that's the thing. When you were commissioner of boxing in New York, I'm going to want to talk soon about one of the controversial decisions you made as commissioner. But when you were assigning referees and judges, was it a rotating basis, or did you just go with your A team? Because certain commissioners might have an A team. I know Randy Gordon told me when he was commissioner, he had an A team. He sectioned it off, and those are the guys he wanted to use. How did you make those assignments? What went into it?
Let me say this. There's a lot of big money to be made officiating, especially in world title fights. At one time, I gave a referee, and I think it's increased. At one time, I gave a referee, I didn't pay him, the promoter paid him, but I gave him a check for $9,000. And I think that today they're earning significantly more in certain jurisdictions, right? And I gave judges $6,000 checks for one fight, even if it ended in the first round. Plus, in addition to the money that you can make, and look, most of us don't do this for the money. Most of the people that I've met, they love boxing like I do. I love sports, not just boxing. I love sports. I watch football. I watch hockey.
I assume what do you think of, well, Frank's a Miami Dolphin fan, so he doesn't have much hope during the year. I don't have much as a Jet fan either. You're a New Yorker originally. We got to point it out to the audience, in California now, but your heart, I'm sure, is in New York.
Getting back, Jack, to the thing about how did I appoint officials. So there's money to be made. Plus, there's recognition. If you don't work significant fights in the jurisdiction that you live in where you're licensed, you're probably not going to get licensed in other jurisdictions, including, for example, Nevada or Florida or Texas or Michigan. So the idea that the home state where you live and they're giving you significant fights helps you get a license elsewhere and perhaps work elsewhere. Now, the commission's job isn't to make your career, but the commission shouldn't hinder your career. Most judges, I find, the scores are not that disparate from the people who are considered the best judges or the best referees and the ones who are considered sort of like the rank and file of judges and referees. Larry Hazard told me not that long ago that what he thinks is the better judges in the big fights, they don't succumb to the pressure. And that's what distinguishes a really good judge. You have a club show, you have 4s and 6s and maybe an 8, maybe a 10, but it's different than when the lights are on or when it's a television bout or a pay-per-view event and millions of people are watching. I don't deny that might be different. That said, I believe that give everybody an opportunity to show that they're good, show them that you're confident in them, that you have confidence in them, let them know that you believe in them. And so my way of doing it was to try to get everybody involved, let everybody work. And if they were horrible, if they were even terrible, or if they weren't good enough, I certainly wouldn't let them referee. And at some point, I wouldn't let them judge either. But I like the idea that since there's recognition to be had and money to be earned, I try to get as many people that are licensed involved as I could.
Well, I want to talk about one decision you made as commissioner that was the most newsworthy, at least, when you suspended Evander Holyfield after losing to Larry Donald. Evander Holyfield lost very widely on points. Personally, I didn't agree with the decision at the time. but it was a very popular decision you made because people at that point felt Holyfield was way past it. He was a shot fighter. He proved after that he did have something left, but it did get favorable reviews. And Frank, I don't know what your feeling was at the time when Holyfield got suspended after losing to Larry Donald. And in fairness to Ron, Holyfield looked terrible in that fight. He couldn't get off at all. If Donald didn't win every round, he won 9 of the 10 rounds, clearly.
He won 11 out of 12 on 2 cards.
12 was the 12th round.
12 on the other card. You got to remember.
Okay.
You got to remember that he had lost 3 straight fights before that. I think he was knocked out in one, and he lost by wide decisions in the other 2. And I was at the one that he lost. I think it was at the Mohegan Sun or Foxwoods. So
wait. That's a competitive fight against who? John Ruiz?
He fought Ruiz.
No, after that, Jack. You mean after the Chris Bird fight too, right, Ron?
He fought Bird. He fought Ruiz, and did he fight? Okay. Who else did he fight? I think he had 3 losses.
He fought Larry Donald. He fought Donald. He lost to Bird, lost to Tony, lost to Donald.
Right.
I can understand that. He looked bad against Tony, got stopped.
Let me say this to you. I watched The Harder They Fall, Requiem for a Heavyweight, all of those films on the waterfront. Familiar with all those films, right? Requiem for a Heavyweight, when I wrote Lippy, I went to see David Susskind, the producer. And he produced Requiem for a Heavyweight on Broadway, and it previewed, and then it closed the night it opened. It starred John Lithgow in the role for Anthony Quinn and Jack Palance. And so I was very familiar with that fighter that the manager in Requiem for a Heavyweight was using to satisfy the debts that he owed the mob. Remember that? When I went home after the Donald fight in the Garden with Holyfield, I said to myself, this guy's getting beat up. He lost 10 and 11 rounds out of 12. He was out-punched 4-1. He was out-hit 4-1. I called the other 2 commissioners and the head doctor that night or in the morning, I don't recall which. And I told them that I thought I wanted to suspend Evander. I wanted them to go along with it so that it was a commission decision. They all agreed. And you have to notify, at that time, it was Fight Facts, not BoxRec. You had to notify them within 3 days of the fight. That was the law. You had to notify. I notified them, complied with the law. And of course, he was upset. His manager was upset. And the bottom line in that particular fight was that he went into that fight with an injured shoulder. And he'd been fighting with an injured shoulder, which he didn't disclose to anyone. And our doctors at the pre-fight physicals, he did all his medicals, but of course they get a physical exam at the weigh-in, and he didn't disclose that he had a hurt shoulder. So after I suspended him, he told me, he said, I had a bad shoulder. I said, so not only did you lie to the doctors and not disclose your injury, but you defrauded the public. People spent a lot of money to come to see you fight, and you weren't 100%. You defrauded everybody. You want me to feel sorry? I don't, but I will do this. I will arrange with the chief medical officer, who was Dr. Barry Jordan at the time, to give you a battery of tests, and if you pass them, we will reinstate you. He took almost a year to take those tests. He could have taken them right away. He spent a year. We gave him thousands of dollars, the state of New York spent, to allow him to take those tests. It cost him nothing. He had to travel to North Carolina to take 2 of those tests. The other 5 he took, I think, where he lived, in Georgia at the time. He passed the test. A couple were marginal, but if it were anybody else, we would have restored his license. So I think it was a year or a year and a half later that I took him off the indefinite medical suspension. And the reason for the medical suspension was based on poor performance. Poor performance is not often used, but it's been used on a few occasions. Annabelle Miramontes, who was the head of Fight Facts at the time, told me that it wasn't the first time a fighter had been suspended for poor performance. Of course, Showtime was upset because he was a cash cow for them and thought that the commission shouldn't do that. I was interviewed on Real Sports at 15-minute segments, and I think it was I forgot the interviewer, famous interviewer. And
Ryan Gumble?
No, it wasn't Gumble, who was the host of the whole thing.
Bernie Goldberg?
Frank DeFord?
No, it was he does CBS. He did football. He was the moderator in the studio show. Very nice man. And he said to me,
Jackson. It's not important.
Anyway, so he asked me basically what the two of you were talking about, and asked me. And I said to him, if a commission isn't going to look out for the health and safety of a fighter, then what the hell are we here for?
Well, let me get into the situation Frank and myself were talking about before you came on the show. Manny Pacquiao, age 46, 4-year layoff. There's wear and tear there. He's going right into a title bout. Let's forget about him being given his license. He's going right into a title bout. And I know you're limited in what you can say, being a judge in California, whether the fight's taking place in your state or not, because there's always a small chance you could get that assignment. You never know. So you can't give an opinion who would beat who or whatever. But in general, older fighters being relicensed, there's something to that.
Well, Mayweather is going to fight again. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, Pacquiao, Manny
Pacquiao. Yeah.
He's fighting Mario Barrios. Okay, a comeback fight in July 19th. That's gonna be a busy day
for the title.
The price for title. Yeah, WBC is sanctioning that as a world title fight. And Pacquiao's coming off a long layoff. Now, you were promoted too, Ron. Yep. How was it being a promoter and a matchmaker? The one job in boxing that would keep me up nights I dread having with being a matchmaker. It's rewarding on one end. It's the worst on the other end, with guys pulling out at the last moment, trying to save shows. I mean, tell us a little about that.
Matchmaking is like driving a taxi in Manhattan. It's like carrying a piano on your back. It's the toughest job in boxing.
I could see Laterzo driving a cab in Manhattan. I don't know why.
Say that again.
I don't know how to take that, Jack.
No. I could see Frank, and with that, driving around Manhattan. No, he's a Philly guy, Philly/Jersey.
I drove a limo in Manhattan for a while for one of the casinos years ago, and I had nothing but run-ins with the cab drivers cut me off.
Yeah, I see. You can imagine.
Cab drivers are desperate. Because listen, back when I first drove a cab, I was a senior at Hofstra University. So it was 1968.
You're a Jets fan.
I'm a Jet and a Giant fan. I'm a Ranger, Devil, and Islander fan. I'm a Net and Nick fan. I'm a Yankee and a Met fan. And I like the Dodgers.
You want to know why? Because the New York teams, outside of the baseball teams at the current time, have been so bad. Ron figures if he's a fan of both, he's got double.
The Knicks aren't doing bad, Jack.
No, Knicks are fine. But if they get eliminated tonight, same old.
I mean, if they eliminated they're 2-1. They could only lose tonight. They'd be 2-2.
Right. But okay. So how is life as a promoter/matchmaker? I mean, what was your most enjoyable position in boxing? Commissioner, promoter, magazine editor, boxing judge,
ring announcer.
What else am I missing?
Let me tell you, if you don't mind. So, if you don't mind, I went to law school, and I went for a year, and it was very difficult. My dad passed away. I dropped out. I usually finish what I start. So I went back to law school. I went for another 6 months and realized that I was never going to pass the bar exam. I wasn't good at studying. I write. I'm at the desk 6, 8, 10 hours a day sometimes, all by myself. But studying was different. So I dropped out of law school. But I was angry at myself for dropping out. I found out that in New York, if you had 1 year of law school at that time, you could clerk if you got a law firm that would sponsor you. So I was living up in Woodstock, New York, and Kingston, which was about 12 miles away. I got a job working for a law firm as a clerk. I was certified by the Court of Appeals. In New York, you probably know this, the Court of Appeals is the highest court in New York. The Supreme Court is a trial court. So in New York, the Supreme Court is the trial court. The appellate court is the intermediate court, and the Court of Appeals is basically the Supreme Court. So I was certified by the Court of Appeals, and if I clerked for 3 years, I could have taken the bar exam. So I clerked for 1 year, and I realized that I still wasn't going to pass the bar exam if I clerked, right? So now I stop. So now I'm a waiter, I'm a taxi cab driver, I'm a carpenter that doesn't know how to nail anything into anything. You know, I'm a school teacher. I was licensed by the state of New York as an English teacher. That I didn't like either. And so anyway, one day I'm working as a waiter in downtown Brooklyn at an Italian restaurant, and I'm getting older. I'm 30, and I'm going in a big circle. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a doctor. I'm not even an Indian chief, right? And I'm putting on the black pants and the white shirt, and a light went off in my head. Now, let me just go back. As a boy, I watched boxing like you wouldn't believe. Those Friday night fights, I'm a young boy. I'm watching everything. I mean, I love boxing. I even boxed from the age of 10 to 14. And I was boxing in the Bedford Boys Club. At 14, I went home with a little bit of a headache, and I said to myself, you know what? I don't need to box. I like football. I swim. I played football for Erasmus. I swam for Erasmus. I don't need to box. I love boxing. So I'm getting dressed. I'm going to work as a waiter. And I said to myself, Ronnie, you really went in one big circle. What the hell are you going to do now? And a light went off in my head. And it said, Ron, go into boxing. It's the sport of an underdog, and you're an underdog. And the next day I made my way to Gleason's Gym, which was on 30th Street between 7th and 8th near the Garden. Now, I had been an announcer in Woodstock, New York, in Kingston and Port Ewan, working for the radio station, WDST. I worked for the cable television station.
Ron, we have about a minute and a half left. So, yeah.
To make a long story short,
yeah.
I had been an announcer for cable television, for radio. I've been writing newspapers for the Woodstock Times. I wrote a sports column. I found myself going to Gleason's Gym. I held myself out as an announcer, and I got a job as a ring announcer. And from there, a guy came over to me in the gym one day and said, Ron, I'd like you to make a show for me. I said, I'm not a matchmaker. He said, yes, you are. I started to make fights. I made fights for 5-6 years for different promoters. When Gleason's opened an arena a block from their gym, I became a promoter, Powerhouse Enterprises.
Right. Ron, we got to wrap up just very quickly in 30 seconds. Tell us about your book in 30 seconds. Okay. One last.
Red, Green, and Yellow is the first of 3. It's a first book it's a screenplay. And what follows it is In the Heart of Brooklyn and The Monkey Queen. It's about a cab driver that's selling cocaine out of the cab. I don't want to tell you the whole story. It's a really good story. There's a sequel called In the Heart of Brooklyn, and the sequel to The Heart of Brooklyn is called The Monkey Queen. I'm hoping that somebody wants to produce it. It's exciting. So, it's on Amazon.
Well, you out there, you see it on the screen, to get it on Amazon, you could Google Ron's name with whatever, Ron Scott Stevens. Appreciate you coming on. Great boxing, man. You've done it all in boxing. So
Thank you. Thank you.
To have you on this
Thanks for
show
coming
tonight.
on, Ron. Good job.
Frank, thank you very much, guys. Okay.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you so much. Bye.